want to encourage you to put this phone number in your phones, because next week when you've got a question or you have a great idea about what you would like a segment, a breakout session on, you can text it to us right then and there. You don't have to wait to see me on Sunday and then forget that you wanted a breakout session on something. Yesterday, Claire and I were talking, and we came up with a great breakout session for the next time, is what are the red flags that you need to look for when you're dating somebody? I think that, what questions do you need to ask, and that kind of thing. So that's on the agenda for next time. I think that will be a good one. But if you guys have ideas for us on what you would like to see as far as conversation about abuse, please text it to us or somehow get that to us. I'm going to offer you one more quote, and this is from Martin Luther King. He was preaching on the Good Samaritan, and he says, "The first question which the priest and the Levite asked was, 'If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?' But the Good Samaritan, he reversed the question. 'If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?'" And I think that's a very important question for us to ask. And I'd like to introduce our next speaker. His name is Officer Matt Breese. He has been a police officer for 16 years. He has 7 children of his own that he protects and wants to see a world that is safe for them. And he is specializing in, he's being trained as a forensic children's investigator. And so knowing how to ask those questions and to get the evidence that he needs for proof within a court of law, that's what he is going to be specializing in. And we're excited about that. We're excited to have him speak to us today about how do we work with the police and the CPS, and what kinds of things do they need from us, and what kinds of things can we expect from him. And so if you would please join me in welcoming him, Mr. Matt Breese.
So, I have been in law enforcement for 16 years now. I wanted to kind of start off and say that I am not speaking officially for the Moscow Police Department or the Latah County Sheriff's Office. These are agencies in their own right. They have their own policies and procedures that will vary. So I'm just wanting to bring my law enforcement experience to the table, not necessarily say this is what exactly you're going to see or what you're going to experience when you go to a local law enforcement agency. We all have our own policies and procedures that we need to follow. One of the things I wanted to do is kind of humanize the law enforcement end of things. Oftentimes there's a lot of unwritten expectations that people have when they come in, and oftentimes we have our expectations and what we're looking at when victims come in or when people are trying to report domestic abuse. I have been dealing with domestic violence professionally for 16 years now, sexual assaults professionally for 16 years now, and I think it probably struck me the hardest when I found out it was happening with one of my friends. And that was when a lot of this really just kind of opened my eyes that, oh yeah, I deal with this professionally, and there's a way we can detach as law enforcement. That's how I deal with the particular stressors, is kind of detach myself from the situation. But then it became really personal. It became my friend. And then the guy I thought was my friend was the abuser. Holy crap. Okay, I've welcomed this person into my home. I've done all this stuff, and now I have to deal with a friend that's abusing his wife. So at that point, it was fascinating just to watch Claire up here just hit point after point after point. You will see these things over and over again. This is textbook stuff. It's harder when you're in the middle of it. When you're in the middle of it and you're trying to help a friend, it can be very, very difficult. Sometimes to see, sometimes to react the way we're supposed to react. Other times, and I will attest to this, there were many times in the particular instance that I went through, I wanted to give up. It was 4 years. 4 years. I don't know how many times I told my wife, look, we're done. And she was more persistent than I was. I look at myself as kind of a battlefield medic. So I have a hard time with long-term relationships, and advocating for domestic violence victims, abuse victims, that's long-term commitment. Make no mistake about it. It is long-term commitment. I deal with the short-term battle. I want to try and immediately get people safe. I want to get the evidence that we need to prosecute. So I also like interactive stuff. However, I know that there's like a level of anonymity that people are like, oh, okay, I don't want to say. I totally get that. But I grew up in a home that was not a big fan of law enforcement. They were the enemy. My dad, I didn't realize until after I became a cop, my dad had been arrested a couple times, mostly for driving like an ass. But when I said, hey, I want to join CHPs, I was going to join the enemy. So I remember as a kid, we got pulled over and I hear my dad swear. I look behind and say, hey, Dad, there's a cop behind us. Yeah, I know. Hey, Dad, his lights are on. Yeah, I know. So that was kind of the mentality that I had growing up. They weren't the friends. I was always on the lookout for cops because I drove like an ass like my dad. So I got into this career field more of a, if you can't beat them, join them. And I had no, dreams as a kid. I want to be a policeman. That wasn't me. So when I got into this job, it really did help me have the ability to start helping people and looking in smaller community and really affecting people's lives, whether it was DUIs and taking those off the road or helping domestic violence victims or assault victims. That being said, who in here like me wants to go to the police? No, I don't. I didn't trust cops. There's a stigma about law enforcement, especially now. We have some really bad press going on. Anyone in here have a bad experience with law enforcement? Right? Hey, I have. I've been on both ends. I've been the cop that's been the jerk, and I've been the victim of the jerk cop. Okay? It happens. We have bad days too. You have bad days, and it's really bad when you have a bad day and the cop has a bad day, and then you meet. So that's usually doesn't end well. So recognize too that we're human. We will drop the ball. We will screw up an investigation sometimes. It happens. I don't go into my day saying, you know what, I'm going to totally botch this investigation and I'm going to make it so this victim will not be able to get the satisfaction and the help that she needs. There's not a single day that I've gone in and said that. I'm just going to half-ass this investigation so that I can move on to something else. I also apologize for my mouth. I'm usually around other cops, so apologize. I will try to keep it at a minimum. So we all have our apprehensions about coming into law enforcement. It's kind of coming to law enforcement. It's a big mystery. We can be intimidating. The badge, the gun. I actually wore this so that I would have some level of authenticity, because oftentimes people say, you don't count. You're not a real cop. I am. So coming into law enforcement, what are you going to expect? What do you expect from us? Are there anyone who'd be willing to volunteer? If you were to bring in a victim of domestic violence, what do you want to see from law enforcement? Fix the problem. Okay. Arrest the person. Hear their story. Okay. Believe it. That can be a big one. Be helpful. Okay. Compassionate to the victim. Okay. What do you think prevents people from going to law enforcement? What are some ideas?
I fear being wrong.
You fear
Being wrong.
being wrong. Okay.
I'm thinking like the
make it worse. Sometimes we have that effect on people.
Fear, feeling stupid, or as though it's not that big a deal, or you shouldn't be there.
Okay? Because we get a lot of minimizing with victims. Yeah, this is normal, it's no big deal, he's not that bad. Right? Okay.
Compassion for the perpetrator.
Compassion for the...
I hear, oh yeah, this did happen, but I don't want to report it because I don't want to ruin his life.
Okay. Okay. Those are all very, very good points. Very good pros and cons for going to law enforcement, reasons why we're apprehensive about going to law enforcement and what we expect. When I sit down with a victim, I want to hear their story. I do. But my main focus is, what evidence do I have? How can I take this story, this victim, how can I take it to the end of the story and have a conviction? Okay? There is a huge gap between the start and the end of that. I want to be that compassionate officer that's going to be willing to listen, that's going to believe, that's going to encourage and trust. However, the story can be absolutely 100% true, and I cannot get a conviction. Okay? There are times where I might think, hey, I've got a good case here. And I take all that information to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor looks at it and goes, that's why you're not a lawyer. You've got nothing. We don't have, I usually have a better idea if I got something or not. But I could take it to a prosecutor and say, hey, this is what I'm looking at doing. And they look at it and go, I don't think we got it. So I hear the refrain often, the cops didn't do anything. Okay, hear it a lot. And I totally understand from the other side why that's said. Because every victim of domestic violence, every victim of sexual abuse, that is their world. It is their world. It is 100% right in front of them. It is something that you deal with on a daily basis. It's something that's right there. For me, it's a case number. For me, it's an investigation. And I can go home at night and not have to deal with what the victim has to deal with. So when I look at a case and I say, okay, this can go or this can't go, it has a tendency from the victim's perspective to look at it and say, they're not doing anything. I went to them for help and they didn't help. And it's a difficult thing to hear sometimes because I care. I want it to go. But it might not be able to. And it's not for lack of trying on my part. It's not for lack of believing the victim. It's a lack of, I've got to be able to convince 6 or 12 members of a jury that this did happen beyond a reasonable doubt. And I can tell you the sinking feeling that you have when you sit in the witness box, in the witness stand, and you watch the case unravel right before your eyes. It sucks. And I don't like going through that. I don't like getting torn up and down on the evidence and witness stand going through that. It is not a fun feeling. So I like to make sure that I have everything in a row. I'm willing to take a risk. I'm willing to go up there and do it. It's not that I'm not or that we aren't, but it's a matter of what can we do to move this forward. So I hope that makes sense, that as you go to law enforcement, we have a particular role. Our role in law enforcement is to gather the evidence to produce a conviction. Okay? That being said, if you have a suspicion, if there's something that doesn't sit right with you, you're in a relationship, you see someone that's not in it, come talk to us. It doesn't hurt. We're open 24 hours a day. We're staffed 7 days a week. We're paid listeners. And what you might think as an advocate, as a friend, this is innocuous, this is no big deal. It could be one more thing that's documented on this pervert, on this person, because you don't know that so-and-so came in last week and said, yeah, I was at the pool and this guy did this. And you don't know, oh yeah, I've seen this guy. Or, oh yeah, we know this guy. Yeah, I can name off about 6 or 7 guys running around Lewiston right now that, well, there's a guy who's trying to have sex with a tree. Yeah, we know him. Okay, welcome to Lewiston. Okay, so there are things that we might be familiar with this person, and it might be one more nail in the coffin of damnation for them as far as getting a conviction on someone else's case. So giving that information, contacting law enforcement, say, hey, you know what? And I having been married for as long as I have been, my wife has great intuition. She's got a freaking pervert detector that she's like, whoa, that dude, something's weird with him. And lo and behold, something is weird with that guy. Pay attention to those. Doesn't mean you're being some vindictive spouse or vindictive friend. It's like, something's just not sitting right. If something doesn't sit right up here and you're observing it and it's, that's just weird. I've never seen someone do that before. Why does that guy do that? Why does he always say that? Why does she say that? Pay attention to those indicators and just watch. You don't have to be a super nosy friend, but just watch. Sit back. Let us know. Come to law enforcement. I was told Claire I was going to come up here and just grab the mic and say, I'm with the government, I'm here to help. Drop it and walk away. We actually are. But there are things that you can do as a friend, as a citizen, that I can't do as law enforcement. I have limitations. I have restrictions. Child custody disputes I really have a difficult time with because every parent wants me to kick in the door of the other parent, yard the kids out, give them to me. I can't do that, And we all come in and we say, okay, I want you to go and do this, and I expect you. I want to see an arrest. I want to see all this happen. I got a call the other day. This lady was a victim of a theft, and she called me to let me know that this guy was out on the streets, and she wanted to know why. And I needed to go arrest him. I'm like, I already did. I said, the wheels of justice move a little slow. It's going to take some time. Okay, and then the most frustrating thing is when you come to us, we build a case, and we're great. We're going to go to jury trial. We're going to stick it to this guy, and then he's acquitted. Oh boy, that sucks. That's one of the hardest things in law enforcement, when you know a kid's been molested, when you know that a kid has been a victim of this pervert, and you have to let him go. And as soon as you let that child back, something's going to happen. Nothing I can do. I can know the guy 100% is going to molest that child. And if I can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, there's nothing I can do. So, that's my job, okay? CPS. When I say those 3 letters, does it bring comfort? Okay. No, it didn't to me either, any more than cop, okay? When I would see a cop in my rearview mirror, I still, to this day, kind of like, jeez, right? So, CPS, same thing. I mean, they seem to have more power wielded. I mean, they're like gods of families, and they're like not nice gods of families, okay? At least that's the perception. Okay? You spank your kid, they're going to yard them out, they're going to take them. You make a mistake, you do something, you leave them in the car for, while you run into the grocery store, a CPS employee walks by, it's like, oh my, there you are now, my child, and they take your child away. So they have this boogie monster feel and reputation. It's not the case. Who in here thinks that CPS has the power to take away your children? Okay. They don't. I do. They have to call us to come and take your kids. So if it's an emergency situation, it's an imminent danger type of situation, I'm the one that signs on the dotted line. They don't. They have to call us. So we go into a home, and I have seen some homes, let me tell you. I have seen the amount of patience that CPS employees have for what they see and what they have to deal with is astronomical. In the same way that I might not be able to get a conviction for a child molester, at the same time they're looking at this home going, there are fleas, there are lice, there's garbage stacked this tall. You have to walk through a path to get to the door. There's garbage, there's feces, dog crap, everything. All right, Johnny, you go back to mom. I've seen some horrific stuff. And it's like, well, it's not that bad. I've seen worse. And the kid goes back. I've seen situations where they fight for reconciliation in the family. They might have an emergency placement, but they fight for reconciliation much longer than I ever would. Okay, we're going to try again to get you to where you are set to take your child back over and over and over again. The horror stories. Now, this is Idaho, I will say, and there's always going to be some person in any profession that takes it to a level that they shouldn't, right? There are overzealous cops, there are overzealous doctors, there are overzealous nurses, there are overzealous CPS employees. We all can be tempted to make that mistake, okay? Not to say that they won't make mistakes, not to say that I won't make a mistake, but just that by and large, the overall feel is not, I'm going to yard your kids from you, okay? It's not their job. Believe it or not, I sat down, I had a lady, she had 5 kids. 2 were taken away years ago in another state. She had twins. The twins were medically fragile, and she had a 4-year-old boy, 4-year-old boy. And so the CPS worker was working with her, going through this process, and little kid stripped off all his clothes and he had a couple bruises on his butt. CPS employee goes, oh, that's interesting. What happened? Mama did it. Oh, okay. No. And so she starts, making excuses. And okay, so she was really nice, CPS employee. Okay. So she asked her a couple questions and then left. And the next day she called me and said, look, I want to do some follow-up. I'd appreciate it if you'd come out and help me. So I went out and started talking to this lady. And you could tell at first she was really trying to put on the bold face. I got this under control. I'm okay. It took about 20 minutes for that little boy to start pushing those buttons. And you can tell she might not have the best parenting skills in the world, but 90% of what was going on, she was overwhelmed. She got medically fragile kids and a spitfire little kid that doesn't listen. Wouldn't listen to her at all. So it was a pretty easy story to figure out in my head. She got overwhelmed. She smacked him because he wasn't listening, left him on. Not the crime of the century. Not a good thing, but not the crime of the century. So it took about 45 minutes to an hour of talking to her, and she finally, after blaming 3 other people, she finally said, look, yeah, I was overwhelmed, and I hit him. Spanked him once, and it happened. I said, okay. So let's start talking about options. So I sat down with this CPS employee. We started talking about sensory issues with children, resources that were available. What is your plan? Where do you get respite care from? Because she's got an anger issue and there's something that's going on. But are we going to yard her kids away from her again? Or are we going to try and work and give her resources, give her tools? It's easy. It's kind of like throwing money at a problem. Anybody can throw money at a problem. That's an easy solution, but it doesn't really fix anything. Giving people the resources and the ability to overcome these issues and work with them, that's the hard part. That's long-term care. That's what CPS does. And they have a ton of resources available for moms. Financial, respite care. You just have to ask them for help. I can guarantee not a single person in this room walking in and said, I'm going to go ask CPS for help with my family. It's the last thing we think of. But they have those resources available. They're government funded. They've got lots of money that the government throws at them, you need a sensory blanket because your child has sensory issues and acts out in a particular way, man, they offered to buy this lady a $600 sensory blanket just so that, hey, that's what the child needs. And if the child then has that ability to, I can relax, guess who's not going to get overwhelmed and smack the kid? So we also have what's called a multidisciplinary team. It consists of law enforcement, prosecutors, and CPS. And we meet on a regular basis, weekly basis, and we go over all the child abuse cases, and we sit down and we talk about what's going on. Well, when this case came up, between all three areas, they decided, you know what, we're going to charge this lady with injury to child. We want to see that happen. Not because we want her to go to jail, not because we want her to, we want her kids. It's that some people need motivation with that consequence in order to fulfill what they need to fulfill. So it was a means by which all three of these entities agreed to say, okay, we're going to charge, not to send her to jail, but to say, okay, if this is hanging over her head, then I know that she's going to go to counseling. She goes to counseling, you don't have to worry about it, the charge. If she's going to do this, this, and this, because that's the motivation that this particular woman needed given her history. So I showed up the next day, said, hey, I'm giving you a citation. It's not the end of the world. Sit down, talk with your CPS advocate, and go over this stuff. What are your options that are available to you? She hasn't spent any time in jail, but it's a matter of getting her motivated to get the resources that she needs so that she doesn't feel overwhelmed as a mom. That's what CPS does. Those are what your advocates do. I don't typically do those things, okay? As law enforcement, I'm looking for evidence, crime, and I try to explain to my victims as best as I can that if I don't move forward in a criminal case, it's not that I don't believe you. It's not that I don't think that this didn't happen. It's that I just lack the evidence to move forward. And in certain cases with child molestation, those types of things, there's no statute of limitations. You can come back 30 years later. Say, hey, look, this is what it's a whole lot harder to prove, but you work through some things, and it's not a totally outlandish thing to do. Okay. Mandatory reporting, Claire mentioned that. I'll read you the first part of the statute here. It's Idaho Code 1605. Any physician, resident on hospital staff, intern, nurse, coroner, school teacher, daycare personnel, social worker, or other person. That's everybody in here. Or other person having reason to believe that a child under the age of 18 years has been abused, abandoned, or neglected, or who observed the child being subjected to conditions or circumstances which would reasonably result in abuse, abandonment, or neglect, shall report or cause to be reported within 24 hours such conditions or circumstances to the proper law enforcement agency. Shall. So, you fail to do that, it's a misdemeanor. We have charged, there was a mother, her boyfriend was sexually abusing her kid. And I know every mother in here is like, how in the world could you just stand by and let that happen? It happens. Abuse victims, she was being abused, her child was being abused, and you're not thinking clearly, and you are stuck. And she sat by and she knew that he was sexually molesting and physically abusing this child horribly. She ended up getting charged. It's just one of those things. Because it was bad. So, not to say we're, this when the cops are going to come and charge you. That's not the case. This was a particularly bad case. So, as a mandatory reporter, everyone in here, let us know. Doesn't mean that we're going to go in and make a bunch of arrests. It doesn't mean that there's going to be this huge investigation, but you got to let us know. Oftentimes we want to say, oh, well, I want to press charges. Well, might not be able to. In fact, you and I could agree, yeah, we need to press charges, and I take it to the prosecutor, and they go, we're not going to do it. Or, I don't want to press charges. I hear that a lot, because sympathy for the abuser is very, very common. I don't want to press charges. I don't want anything to happen to him. Well, we have victimless crime. We have victimless cases, prosecution. I don't need your permission. I'm going to go ahead and charge the jerk anyway. Okay? He's abusing he's abusing your child. I don't care whether you want to or not, I'm going to. There are certain cases that the state will look at and say, it doesn't matter, we're going to take this. Okay? There was a question that was asked about child behavior, what to look for earlier. Any significant change for that particular child. If the child's happy and all of a sudden they become sullen. If the child's outgoing and they just stop. If the child starts not wanting to go to someone's house that they normally want to go to. Any major change, not like I'm having a bad day change. Everybody has bad days. I still do have. But any major behavioral change, look for that. Okay? Because it really depends on the child. And it depends on how long they've been being abused. We had a guy that from 6 months old, he was abusing his daughter all the way up till she was 14. That girl knew nothing else. That was normal for her. And that was the love that she loved her dad. That was normal for her. So there was no change in behavior. It just accidentally happened to come out one time. Oh, what? And this guy wasn't even on the radar. There was no history. He wasn't a sexual predator. As far as we were concerned, nothing on the radar. So he went to prison for a long, long time. But, so on that girl, there was nothing. No change in behavior, no nothing, because that was normal for her. It was a normal state of being. And not to really freak people out, okay? But predators, particularly sexual predators, they're going to be your friends. They're going to be people you trust. That's how they do what they do. It's always the trusted family member. It's always the trusted friend. It's always someone that comes close. What you should look for is isolating behavior with one particular child. If someone is really focusing on one of your kids, paying them special attention, giving them gifts, doing all sorts of things like that, wanting to spend a lot of time with that particular child, huge red flag. Even if they're nice folks. I felt this message, no one wants to believe their friends are capable of doing that. But they are. And they're the ones that, I read a book, it's called, I was going to have my wife read it, and then I read it, and I said, no, you can't. Because she has a tendency to read something like this and then project it on me. I'm like, whoa, not me. But it was male and female predators. I was interviewing and identifying child predators. And holy crud. They were already in prison, they were never coming out again, so they just sat down, and these professional interviewers came in and talked to them. He says, when I'm in predator mode, he says, I am your best friend. I'm the nicest guy. You will never suspect me. Never. He said, because I'm that guy. I'm good at what I do. There was a 12-year gap with one guy. He was good for 12 years. And then he found temptation that he couldn't resist. So it happens. And it happens, like Claire said, here. It happens next door. It happens in our lives. And we want to believe that good narrative. We really do. But this world can hand you a crap sandwich really fast. Okay? Let's see here. Oh, one last thing as a side note with kids. If a child, especially a small child, discloses, how you question and how you talk to that child and how you respond can make or break a case. Okay? I've seen it done well and I've seen it done horribly. Please, 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 don't, and tell all your friends with children this, don't ask leading questions. Did he do this? Did he do this? Did he do this? And sit there, because the smaller they are, the easier they are, the more susceptible they are to suggestion and generating memories that they believe happen. One of the best questions that you could ever ask, Claire brought it up there, tell me more about that. It's open-ended. Let the child explain what had happened, and don't be shocked. Oh, because those words and that terminology or that whatever, that subject should not be coming out of the mouth of a child that small. The less reactive you are, the more likely the child will go, oh, mommy or daddy are comfortable with me saying this. I'm going to tell them more. You can repeat back, oh, you said daddy does this. Tell me more about that. It's what the child said. You can repeat what the child said back. Say, oh, tell me more about that. And then, lo and behold, I had my uncle-in-law, he was a polygrapher for San Francisco PD. And I had the first time I met him at some family gathering with my wife. And he had an hour-long conversation with me. And at the end, he explained it to me. The only thing he ever said was, oh, tell me more about that. I rambled on for an hour. He just would repeat what I said back. Oh, you said you're in the police academy. Tell me more about that. And I tell him, I said, oh, you said this. Tell me more about that. I had no idea. And I gave him my whole life story. And all I asked was, tell me more about that. It's a great, great question. So that being said, I'm going to wrap up and open up for questions here.
All right. Okay, the first question we have is there anything we can do as friends of a victim to help gather evidence?
Oh, yes. It depends on the situation and how dangerous it is. But anything, so domestic violence, sexual abuse does not happen out in the open. Okay? These are private types of, usually when it happens out in the open, it's bad. So these are private types of situations. I gave my friend a pocket recorder. And I said, okay, look, this is a private thing. No one's there to witness it. I said, find a good hiding spot. And just when the argument starts, just go ahead, push the button, and walk away and take it somewhere else within earshot. Do that. Have sneaky suggestions like that. Photographs. Yeah, you come over, and you notice there's a bruise. Hey, you look pretty today. Can I take your picture? Yeah, and I have to focus on what that is. And then it could be nothing. Oh, yeah, whatever. But, yeah, you can be sneaky and kind at the same time, but think to be crafty. What can okay, this scumbag's going to jail, and I want to make sure that he doesn't come out. What would I need to be convinced of that?
Okay, so the next one is, if my friend tells me that she's been yelled at in the middle of the night for 3 hours, but she doesn't want to report, that's just emotional abuse, but it is abuse. Is that something as a friend that I would take to the police? It's not domestic, but it could add into a case down the road.
Yes, you could. Again, having documentation of incidents is always good. One of the things that we look into is like, okay, is there a history of domestic violence? Yeah, this has been going on for years. Well, nothing's ever been reported. Nothing's ever been reported. There's no history. There's no documentation. Then guess what the prosecutor's going to do when they see the suspect dressed up in a tie, looking good, coming in, he's respectable, he's putting on a scam. Oh, this is just a one-time thing. I told it, just didn't send me to an anger management class. Okay, you get probation, and if you complete an anger management class, then, okay. So on something in an emotional abuse, no, we're not going to charge crimes. And you might get an eye rolling at the police officer. Very well could. But, yeah, put it, hey, so-and-so came. It might just be a one-line, hey, so-and-so came in to say that their friend is, or it would be better to hear if we like to hear it from the victim. So bring the victim in. Say, hey, look, this is going on. I just wanted you guys to be aware of it.
Okay. And now if there's children in the home and the children are awake all night because of it, would that be considered child abuse?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Sympathy for the abuser is very, very common. What advice would you give to a spiritual community who is not willing to hear or believe evidence that a member of the community has sexually abused his young daughter?
Okay. This one is a personal one, not necessarily for sexual abuse. Advocate for your friend. And know that as you advocate, given people's worldviews and what people will hold on to their worldview at any cost. And they will go through great lengths to not have that torn out from under them. So especially when you get into religious organizations that have reputations, that want to be known for a particular thing or other, that want to have the semblance of control, and we're clean people and don't want this dirtiness around here, that worldview they will hold on to tightly, and at the cost of the victim. They absolutely will. I've seen it happen. It is super frustrating, but that should not stop you from advocating. You might not be able to change their mind, you might not be able to change their worldview, but you'll go home at night knowing that you did what you could to protect your friend and the victim. Just advocate for them. Don't give up. I think we had 840 some odd pages of emails that we sent to our pastors, and it was like beating our head against the wall. Not pastors here, but yeah, it's very frustrating.
Okay. If it is true that there is very little if it's true that there is very little a police officer can actually do to help abuse victims, what is the solution in protecting, for instance, children in abusive situations? What kind of evidence does police officers need to see in order to move forward with allegations of abuse? In other words, what is good evidence?
Oftentimes what happens, because these are private incidents, unless there is physical evidence of abuse, it becomes a he said, she said type of situation. We cannot prosecute on he said, she said situations. You just can't. There's got to be something else. So photographs, recordings of the incident, interviews with more than one person, children. So, looking around, hey, talk to neighbors. Hey, do you hear what's going on sometimes? So, and we'll do that. So we just need something independent other than the victim and the suspect, because the suspect is going to contradict everything that the victim said. So we've got to have some third objective means to move forward. Does that make sense? And the role of law enforcement, the reason I want you to come to us as soon as possible because we get the ball rolling, because we are direct line with CPS. We are a direct line with victim advocates. There's so many, the YWCA down in Lewiston, the not Palouse Care Network, Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse. Those are all resources that we as law enforcement get a direct pipeline access to, and I can set you up with it. Okay, so it might not be, you come in and you let me know, and I might say, hey, well, you know what, I'm going to document this, I'll talk to so-and-so, and we'll see what we can do, we'll do an investigation. But at the same time, I'm setting you up with CPS, I'm setting you up with Alternatives to Violence on the Palouse, I'm setting you up with all these resources. Hey, come talk to Sherry Hall. Come talk to Natalie. I can set you up with a bunch of different resources so you don't feel alone, or the victim doesn't feel alone. And you as an advocate don't feel alone. Hey, there's help. There's people here.
Awesome, thanks. Okay. I hear you saying there is essentially no help or that it takes years. Mere months can mean a difference between life and death for an abuse victim. What do you think can be done to improve our justice system?
There is no... the biggest frustration for me and our justice system is that it rarely is about the truth, objective truth of the issue. It becomes about loopholes and what loophole can a defense attorney find to get either discredit the officer, discredit the victim. It's all about the loophole. So the objectivity of the incident is kind of pushed aside. That's the society in which we live. That's more than unfortunately, the suspect has, as soon as he becomes a suspect, gets a bunch of rights. You know, I hate watching cop shows because they'd be fired within a matter of minutes. Great, you got a confession out of it, but you're going to prison because you got that confession. I would love to beat the crap out of half the people in there that I know they're lying to me. I can't. So unfortunately, the wheels of justice just move slow, and then some. Again, it's so less than satisfying. Don't put your hope in the criminal justice system. Work on getting your victim safe. Sometimes that's where we can help with protective orders and things like that, but even that's just paper. And sometimes, believe it or not, people don't listen to the protected paper thing. But there's some bite behind that bark, and we can do some things. Get your victim safe. Sometimes that means calling law enforcement. It might be a long-term, hey, they might not see a conviction, but your victim's out of that house, out of that situation. The safety is the big thing. I'll let me worry about the conviction, and hopefully it will work out, but...
All right, here's a great question. What if cops tell domestically abused a woman, she has to have proof of abuse? Bruises are not enough. Get cameras inside and out that record video, but the gal can't afford it. Cameras require Wi-Fi too. That costs even more. What can she do? Is there a way to help her? I would have an issue with a cop that says your bruises aren't enough. That's a pretty good indicator, and an objective third-party witness right there. That's just crappy advice from a cop. I would be appalled if I heard that, and if I overheard another officer saying something like that, then I'd have some issues with it. The thing, too, I would have some major issues with that.
So you would say bruising should be enough and photograph those bruises?
It is.
Okay.
It is. If a woman comes to me and she's got bruises on her and she says, well, I didn't do, she tripped and hit a doorknob. Sorry, bud.
Is that enough to get prosecution, though?
Yeah.
If he's saying that she hit a doorknob?
Yes, we could charge with something like that. So doesn't mean that you're going to get a conviction, but I can move forward with that. If I have even redness, I run into situations where the guy is super calm. Like, hey, she just freaked out on me. She's crying. She's got a red mark on her face. It's not going to be a bruise, but there's evidence that, he's acting way too calm and she's way too hysterical. There very well could be enough. And with domestic violence situations, we are under obligation to arrest, just to let you know. So we go after what we call the primary aggressor. I have arrested women before. It's happened. But we go after the primary aggressor. So when it's a mutual combat and they're going, we try and determine who went over the top. Yeah. So.
Okay. I want a relationship with my abused sister. The only way I am allowed is to be silent about abuse. She is afraid to acknowledge he has cut off the rest of the family. What can I do? And how important is it to report in a timely manner?
With adults, it will benefit our investigation if the victim is cooperative. There are situations where we can take it on our own and we're going to run with it, but it is so much better to have that victim there saying, I'm ready. As a family member, it is really, really difficult to sit back and watch and know that this is going on. But this is where the long-term part comes in, the long-term frustration, the long-term, oh my gosh, how am I gonna go through this? Be there for them when they're ready to be there, when they need you there. Be open, don't be judgmental. Just be there, say, hey, look, I'm here to be your safe friend. I'm here to be your safe sister. And I know you don't want to talk about it right now, but when you're ready, I'm here. I want to help. I love you. I want to be here to help you. If it is something that is violent or in progress, call the police. If she calls you, say, hey, he's hitting me, he's out of control. Call the police. Absolutely. You might have to deal with that on a family level later, but if it's something in progress, call the police. If it's something she's just not wanting to talk about over long term, that's where you just got to be patient.
Okay. Is it better for a parent to question a child on the spot about allegations of abuse or to come straight to the police?
The less questions you ask, the better. So I guess it depends on the age, too. If you're talking really small kid, the less questions you ask, just say, hey, okay, you said something? Oh, well, that's interesting. There's someone I'd like you to talk to. Because you really can mess things up. In order to interview a child from 4 to, say, 9-ish, 9, 10, you have to have specific training. There's 40-hour class you got to go through, and you got to go through all these hoops and in order to have something that's admissible in court. And the problem is, especially with small kids, if you start rapid fire questioning, they'll get overwhelmed, and then they'll just start repeating, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And then you have to do memory verification of where the memory came from. There's all sorts of things that can complicate it. So the least questions possible. If they just disclosed, then okay, thank you for telling me that. Don't be shocked, and just let them say what they need to say.
All right. You were talking about what kind of independent evidence is helpful in child abuse cases. What kinds of evidence should a woman in a DV situation try to gather?
I had, in our particular case, we had photographs. She took later on that night after he went to bed. She went downstairs and got photographs, and that was what really was the table turner and the ability to prosecute. Recordings, and that's risky. All of those things are risky because it depends on how intrusive the abuser is. If he's looking at the phone every day, if he's doing that kind of stuff, that's something where you could take it, email it to a friend, delete everything. That type of thing. So photographs, about the only thing, DNA. So if there's sexual abuse, DNA is the big thing. Panties, underwear, bodily fluids, anything like that. That's stuff that's very, very helpful. But, you know.
Okay. I think we've got time for one more question here. What becomes of a permanent well, this is 6 questions all in one. It's all about the same thing. What becomes of permanent restraining order? Where is it kept? Do you have to call where it was filed to activate it? Or can a person just call local law enforcement where they presently live to activate it? How do they locate it if it has been several years since it's been filed?
So I'm assuming that this is someone out of state because I don't know that there's a permanent protection order in Idaho. We have this really cool system that for domestic violence across all 50 states, if you are a protected person with a restraining order, then it gets entered into a computer system and a computer database that is available to every law enforcement agency. So if you say, I was back in New York and I have this restraining order, I moved to Idaho, and now this guy is in Idaho with me. If I run into you two in a domestic situation and I run you both, it's going to say, hey, there's a restraining order back in New York against these two. They shouldn't be together. He's not supposed to be within 300 feet. Bad. In Idaho, they have one-way restraining orders, and I've had it to where, you know, the victim gets a restraining order, then the suspect gets all pissed off, so then he gets a restraining order. And then it's really goofy in Idaho how they have this. So we know if there's a restraining order. In Idaho also, you can only get a restraining order if there was some type of relationship, unless it was some really, really serious crime, attempted homicide, something like that. Then like, well, Joe, I was never in a relationship with Joe, but he tried to kill me and I don't want him anywhere near me. Totally understood. They will issue restraining orders that way, but by and large, they are for sexual abuse, domestic violence, something where there was a relationship there.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Let's give him a hand. I just want to say thank you for coming today, and we're going to be posting these online, and so if you could share that on Facebook, that would be great. I'm sure Matt and Claire will both be hanging around for a bit, so if you have some other questions for them, you can corner them. Don't let them leave until they can ask. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.